You're in your 20s, and everyone has advice for you. Build your career, find your passion, travel the world, save money, spend money, get married, stay single, start a business, get a stable job. The noise is deafening, and each piece of advice contradicts the last. But 2,400 years ago, a man wandering the streets of Athens had a different suggestion entirely. Socrates, who claimed to know nothing except that he knew nothing, would ask you to stop listening to everyone else for a moment and turn your attention inward. His prescription for your 20s wasn't about what to do, it was about who to become. And it starts with the most difficult task a human can undertake: knowing yourself. Know thyself. These two words, inscribed at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, became the cornerstone of Socratic philosophy. But Socrates understood something about self-knowledge that Instagram quotes and self-help books miss entirely. He knew that knowing yourself isn't a comfortable journey of self-discovery. It's a ruthless interrogation of everything you think you know about who you are. And your 20s, that decade of possibility and confusion, of freedom and anxiety, might be the most important time to undertake this interrogation. Why? Because your 20s are when the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are is widest. You've just emerged from 2 decades of being told who to be by parents, teachers, society. You're wearing an identity assembled from other people's expectations, and you might not even realize it. You think you know what you want, but do you really? Or are you chasing goals that someone else planted in your mind so long ago, you mistake them for your own? Socrates would start with a simple question. What do you think matters most in life? Whatever answer you give, success, happiness, love, impact, he'd follow up with, what do you mean by that? And when you explain, he'd ask, but why is that good? And he'd keep going, question after question, until you realize something unsettling. You're using words you don't understand to describe goals you've never examined for reasons you can't articulate. This is the Socratic method, and it's designed to reveal one thing. You don't know yourself nearly as well as you think you do. Most of us live in what Socrates would call double ignorance. We don't know, and we don't know that we don't know. We're confident in our ignorance, certain about our uncertainty. And nowhere is this more dangerous than in your 20s, when the decisions you make based on this false self-knowledge can shape the rest of your life. Think about the major decisions facing you in this decade. What career to pursue, where to live, who to date or marry, whether to follow conventional paths or forge your own. Each choice requires you to know what you value, what you're good at, what makes you fulfilled. But if you don't truly know yourself, you're making these life-shaping decisions based on illusions. You're building your life on foundations of sand. The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates said this at his trial, facing death, and he meant it literally. He chose to die rather than stop examining life, stop questioning, stop pursuing self-knowledge. But what does examination mean in your 20s? It means something more radical than meditation apps and personality tests. It means questioning every assumption you have about yourself. Start with your desires. That career you're pursuing, why do you want it? For the money? But why do you want money? For security. But what kind of security? And why that kind? Keep digging, and you might find that your desperate pursuit of financial success is really about proving something to a parent who never thought you were good enough. Or that your rebellion against conventional success is just another form of seeking approval, just from a different audience. This is what Socrates meant by the purification of the soul, stripping away false beliefs and borrowed desires until you reach something genuine. It's painful work. Most people in their 20s would rather stay busy than sit with these questions. They'd rather achieve than examine. They'd rather accumulate experiences than understand them. But Socrates would say, you're just postponing the inevitable. Eventually, life will force you to face these questions. Better to choose the timing yourself. Socrates had a word for people who think they know things they don't actually know: sophists. Today we might call them confident idiots. They speak with authority about success, happiness, the good life, but they've never examined what these words mean. Your 20s are full of sophists, including the one in the mirror. You think you know what will make you happy. You think you know what success looks like. You think you know who you are. But have you tested these assumptions? Have you questioned these certainties? The Socratic path in your 20s isn't about finding answers. It's about learning to ask better questions. Not, how can I be successful? But, what do I mean by success? Not, how can I be happy? But, what is happiness? Not, what should I do with my life? But, what kind of person do I want to become? The quality of your questions determines the quality of your life, and most of us are asking the wrong questions entirely. Here's where Socrates becomes practical. He believed that virtue was knowledge, that if you truly know what's good, you'll do it. The problem is, most of us don't know what's good. We think money is good, so we sacrifice our health to get it. We think approval is good, so we sacrifice our authenticity to win it. We think comfort is good, so we sacrifice our growth to maintain it. But these aren't knowledge, they're opinions, and unexamined ones at that. Your 20s are when these unexamined opinions collide with reality. You get the job you thought you wanted and feel empty. You achieve the goal you've been chasing and feel lost. You become who you thought you should be and feel like a stranger to yourself. This isn't failure, it's education. But only if you're paying attention, only if you're willing to examine what these experiences are teaching you about yourself. Socrates would be fascinated by modern 20-somethings. Never before have young people had so many options, so much freedom, so little traditional structure. But he'd also see the danger. With infinite possibilities comes infinite ways to avoid yourself. You can stay perpetually busy, perpetually distracted, perpetually in motion. You can hop from job to job, city to city, relationship to relationship, always moving too fast to hear the questions bubbling up from within. Wisdom begins in wonder, Socrates said. But wonder requires stillness, space, silence. Everything your 20s seem designed to avoid. When was the last time you sat with yourself, without distraction, without agenda, without the armor of activity? When did you last wonder not about the world, but about yourself? Not, what should I do? But, who am I becoming? The tragedy Socrates saw everywhere was people living according to scripts they'd never written, pursuing goals they'd never chosen, becoming people they had never consciously decided to be. They were sleepwalking through life, and the momentum of their unconscious choices was carrying them toward destinations they didn't actually want to reach. Your 20s are when this momentum builds, but also when it's still possible to change direction. But here's what makes self-knowledge so difficult in your 20s. You're still becoming. You're not examining a fixed self, but a self in flux. You're trying to know yourself while simultaneously creating yourself. It's like trying to paint a self-portrait while your face is still changing. This is why Socrates emphasized not knowledge as a destination, but knowing as a practice. You don't know yourself once and for all. You commit to the ongoing process of knowing. This process requires what Socrates called intellectual humility, the recognition that you might be wrong about everything, especially about yourself. This is particularly hard in your 20s, when society expects you to project confidence, to have answers, to know where you're going. Admitting ignorance feels like failure. But Socrates would say it's the beginning of wisdom. You can't learn what you think you already know. You can't grow beyond what you're certain about. Consider how you make decisions. Do you actually deliberate, or do you follow your immediate impulses and then rationalize them afterward? Do you choose, or do you drift? Do you know why you want what you want, or do you just want it? Socrates believed that most people live in a state of akrasia, acting against their better judgment, not out of evil, but out of ignorance. They don't truly know what's best for them, so they can't consistently choose it. Your 20s are prime time for akrasia. You know you should save money, but spend it impulsively. You know relationships require depth, but pursue surface connections. You know health matters, but sacrifice it for short-term pleasures. This isn't moral failure, it's knowledge failure. You haven't deeply understood why these things matter, so your knowledge has no power over your actions. Socrates would examine your relationships with particular interest. Who do you spend time with, and why? Are you drawn to people who challenge you or comfort you? Who make you think or help you forget? Your social circle in your 20s shapes who you become, but most people choose their friends accidentally. Proximity, convenience, shared habits. Socrates believed in friendship as a form of mutual examination. People committed to helping each other live examined lives. But this kind of friendship is rare, especially in your 20s when relationships often revolve around shared activities rather than shared inquiry. How many of your friends really know you? How many could answer questions about your deepest values, your real fears, your authentic aspirations? How many conversations go beyond the surface into the territory of genuine examination? If the answer is not many, you're not alone, but you're also not fully alive in the Socratic sense. The Socratic paradox, that no one does wrong willingly, seems naive until you understand what he meant. People do harmful things not because they're evil, but because they're ignorant. They don't know themselves well enough to act in their own best interest. The person destroying their life with addiction doesn't want destruction. They want relief from pain they haven't examined. The person sabotaging relationships doesn't want loneliness. They're acting out patterns they haven't understood. Your 20s are when these patterns establish themselves. The ways you avoid difficult emotions, the stories you tell yourself about why things happen, the strategies you use to protect your ego. Without examination, these patterns become invisible rails guiding your life in directions you never consciously chose. With examination, they become visible, questionable, changeable. Socrates distinguished between two types of ignorance: simple ignorance, not knowing, and compound ignorance, not knowing that you don't know. Your 20s are designed to move you from compound to simple ignorance. Every failure teaches you something you didn't know about yourself. Every surprise reveals an assumption you didn't know you had. Every strong emotion points to a value you might not have acknowledged, but only if you're paying attention. The oracle at Delphi called Socrates the wisest man in Athens, and he spent years trying to disprove this. He questioned everyone who claimed wisdom and found they all suffered from the same ailment. They thought they knew things they didn't actually know. Finally, he concluded that if he was wise, it was only because he knew that he didn't know. This Socratic ignorance isn't humility, it's clarity. It's seeing yourself without the comfortable delusions that usually cloud self-perception. In your 20s, these delusions are everywhere. You think you're independent, but your choices are shaped by invisible influences. You think you're rational, but emotions you don't understand drive your decisions. You think you're authentic, but you're performing roles you've never consciously chosen. Socrates isn't saying to abandon these things, he's saying to see them clearly. This is why Socrates valued dialogue over monologue, questions over answers, process over conclusions. Self-knowledge isn't something you achieve, it's something you practice. And practice requires partners, people willing to question you lovingly but relentlessly. In your 20s, finding these philosophical friends might be more important than finding career mentors or romantic partners. They're the ones who will help you see your blind spots, challenge your assumptions, call out your contradictions. But even with help, the work is ultimately solitary. Socrates spoke of his daimonion, an inner voice that would warn him when he was about to make a mistake. We might call it intuition or conscience, but Socrates understood it as the fruit of self-examination. The more you know yourself, the better you can hear this inner guidance. The less you know yourself, the more you're at the mercy of external voices telling you who to be. Your 20s are noisy. Everyone has opinions about what you should do, who you should be, what matters. But Socrates would ask, amid all this noise, can you hear your own voice? Not the voice of your ego, your fears, your borrowed desires, but the voice of your genuine self? And if you can't hear it, isn't that the most urgent problem to solve? The practical implications are radical. Instead of optimizing your resume, optimize your self-awareness. Instead of networking for advantage, seek relationships that promote mutual examination. Instead of accumulating experiences, digest the ones you have. Instead of rushing toward goals, question why you want them. Instead of building your brand, discover your actual self. This isn't a recipe for navel-gazing or paralysis. Socrates lived an engaged life, teaching, questioning, participating in his community, even serving as a soldier. But he did it all from a foundation of self-knowledge, or at least the pursuit of it. He knew that external achievement without internal clarity is hollow, that success without self-knowledge is failure in disguise. Your 20s are when the stakes of self-knowledge become real. The person you become in this decade often sets the trajectory for the rest of your life. Not because change becomes impossible later, but because patterns become entrenched, investments become heavy, momentum becomes hard to redirect. Every year you live without self-knowledge is a year you build on false foundations. But, and this is crucial, Socrates isn't advocating for certainty about yourself. He's advocating for honest uncertainty, for knowing what you don't know, for remaining perpetually open to discovery. The goal isn't to figure yourself out once and for all, but to maintain a living relationship with the question of who you are. Your 20s aren't for answering this question, but for learning how to ask it properly. The examined life Socrates advocates isn't comfortable. It requires admitting you've been wrong about fundamental things. It means disappointing people who had plans for who you should be. It involves sitting with uncertainty while everyone around you seems sure. It demands choosing growth over comfort, truth over convenience, authenticity over approval. No wonder most people prefer to stay busy. But the alternative, the unexamined life, is worse. It's waking up at 40 in a life you never chose. It's achieving everything you thought you wanted and feeling empty. It's realizing you've been so busy becoming someone that you never asked who. It's the quiet desperation of living as a stranger to yourself, successful in everyone's eyes but your own. Socrates offers a different path. Not easier, but more honest. Not comfortable, but more alive. Your 20s are the perfect time to take it, when you have energy for questioning, flexibility for change, time for course correction. When the clay of your character is still wet enough to reshape. When the future is long enough to make self-knowledge worthwhile. Know thyself isn't advice. It's an assignment that takes a lifetime. But your 20s are when you decide whether to accept it, whether to live consciously or unconsciously, whether to examine or assume, whether to know or pretend. The choice you make shapes not just your 20s, but every decade that follows. Socrates chose examination so completely that he died for it. You don't need to go that far, but you do need to choose. Will you spend your 20s accumulating achievements or understanding, building a resume or building a self, impressing others or knowing yourself? The world will push you toward the former. Socrates whispers the invitation to the latter. The question isn't what should matter in your 20s. The question is, who is the you to whom it matters? Until you know that, nothing else you achieve will satisfy. Once you begin to know it, everything else falls into place. Not perfect place, not easy place, but authentic place. And that, Socrates would say, is the beginning of a life worth living. Your 20s are calling you to the most important work a human can do, the work of self-knowledge. Not self-improvement, not self-optimization, but self-knowledge. The raw, uncomfortable, transformative work of seeing yourself clearly, of questioning your assumptions, of examining your life, of discovering who you are beneath all the things you've been told to be. The oracle's inscription still stands. Know thyself. In your 20s, you finally have the freedom and responsibility to try. The question is, will you? Or will you stay busy enough to avoid it until it's almost too late? Socrates is waiting with his questions. Your true self is waiting to be discovered. The examined life is waiting to be lived. What are you waiting for?